Welcome to Crowe Corner with Business Solutions, and today I'm speaking with Rob Janering from the VAT Group. Hi, Rob.
Hi, and thanks for having me here.
That's okay. So today I think we want to speak about VAT and e-commerce and the changes that have recently happened and how they're affecting businesses that we're seeing every day. So I guess the biggest change since Brexit and changes that happened in 2021 about the introduction of iOS
Yes.
and OSS.
Yes.
So what do you think the biggest challenge have been for businesses that you work with?
Yeah, so we work with lots of e-commerce retailers, big ones, small ones, the whole range, warehouses here and in the EU and so forth. And obviously Brexit has created the biggest challenges. So just for some context, before Brexit, we were part of the EU. And if you were selling goods on a B2C basis, you could pretty much sell them all over Europe. You needed a registration in every country, but that was it. Really, where you were selling to, it was a big burden, absolutely. Now, unfortunately, what happened, we had Brexit, and the biggest thing that's happened because of that is that we're not in a single market anymore, so we're not in a customs union. Yeah. And that means whenever the goods leave the UK, they're an export, and there's import VAT when it hits Europe, vice versa for European businesses selling into the UK. And I think the biggest challenge has been managing that. So having to do customs declarations. And at the same time, the EU and the UK have introduced some simplification rules. So you don't have import duty, you don't have import VAT, but there are quite low limits on it. £135 UK and €150 in the EU.
So what do you find about businesses who are like in that borderline area? Is that what's your advice around that?
So it's interesting you say that, because we do have clients who are selling above and below these levels. So if you're selling into the EU from the UK under €150, you can use the importer's one-stop shop. It's pretty simple, actually. But if you've got sales above that value, and I say sales, it's actually the value of the package, so there are other complications. But if you're selling above that, you need to either make your customer the importer. They have quite a burden of paying the import taxes, and you get a lot of returns. Or you've got to be the importer yourself. That means a registration, indirect representative for the import and so forth. So what we've actually found is some people have just turned off the sales above or below that level.
Okay.
So some people only sell below the threshold and simplifies it, but maybe stops making bigger levels of sales or turns people away from the website. Or people have said, no, only above that level, and the customer will be the importer every time, which is not great. It cuts down quite a few routes to market for businesses.
Yeah, definitely something to think about. You can't, it's not as easy anymore.
No, exactly. And the big thing is, it's not the value of the sale, it's what's in the package. Okay. So you put everything in your basket, you buy it. As a business making the sale, you've got to think, is everything in that basket getting shipped at the same time? Yeah. Because if it's not, so the basket might be £200, but it goes in two equal packages, iOS simplification applies. So you've really got to have a coordinated effect of like your Shopify or whatever's your e-commerce engine data versus your dispatch information at the warehouse as well. It becomes quite complicated. Yeah.
So at the tail end of last year, there were some updates to these schemes, and how are they going to now affect these e-commerce businesses who already had loads of changes? Yeah,
absolutely. So at the middle of December last year, there was the EU's VAT in the digital age proposals. So they've still got to be ratified, but we think it's going to go ahead. So we talked about the import one-stop shop, which is single registration. You don't need to register everywhere. There was also the one-stop shop, so you could account for VAT in all the member states under one registration. What these proposals say for e-commerce businesses is they are expanding the use of the one-stop shop. So even when you sold goods and you could account for it at the one-stop shop, if you used multiple warehouses across the EU, you still needed a local VAT registration, and there were some indiscrepancies over how you accounted for VAT on sales. That's going away, and you can use a one-stop shop for all of that. They've also expanded marketplace responsibility. So a lot of the sales now going through marketplaces, the marketplace will account for the VAT and not the seller. As an example, they said, I think it was over 90% of the iOS VAT revenue comes from 8 marketplaces.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So you
Not
can see
surprising, really.
exactly, yeah, and the reason they're doing it,
Yeah.
it stops the VAT gap. So the amount of VAT they expect to collect goes up because the marketplaces, there's only 8 or 9 really big ones when it comes to it.
They're capturing all
As long as they're doing it right, they get lots more. So that's a really big change for e-commerce coming out of it. What it does mean, though, is probably a change to how businesses account for VAT. Again, unfortunately, it should be simpler, but they do need to go and review their supply chains and their reporting obligations again before they can settle down.
Okay, brilliant. So when brands do sell into the EU, there's obviously some considerations they need to think about when they're initially setting up or changing their structure. So what about when they're considering whether they need to ship the goods from the UK and have a UK warehouse only into the EU? Or, you know, is it best to have a warehouse in the EU servicing the EU market?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something we've helped lots of clients with. And what we found a lot of people now do is have 2 warehouse structures. And this isn't a VAT issue so much, it's more of a customs one. So a lot of clothes will be manufactured outside of the EU and coming into the EU or UK, there's normally 12% duty. So if you only had a UK warehouse, there's 12% duty as you come in. It then leaves the UK to the EU and there's 12% duty again. So you end up with double taxation. So what we found is people have a UK warehouse for UK only, or they have a EU warehouse for EU only. And that's been a big development that's happened. There is an alternative if you've got the right level of sales, really, that you can have customs warehouses.
And what kind of sale, what level of sales are you looking for?
So, I mean, we do cost benefit analysis for people, probably £50 million or so upwards, but it all depends on the level of duty and your growth patterns. But what that means is you can bring them into a UK customs warehouse, but they're not imported. So they sit in the warehouse without the taxes applied. And then when you're ready to dispatch to Europe, you move them out and then you only get taxed once. And this is because you only, I know when Brexit happened, it was said it was tariff free and trade free. You only have no tariffs. So it's got UK origin going into the EU, or it's got EU origin going into the UK. And origin obviously means created or made in that territory.
It comes in and then goes out again.
Exactly. So it's just avoiding those big extra costs.
Okay, so we've got brands who want to think about expanding, and part of that expansion is internationally, going maybe into the US, going into Europe. What would you say they need to consider first off? I mean, 3 tips, I suppose.
Yeah, the top 3 tips. So, I mean, we have lots of people set up. The thing I always talk to them about and say is just be really clear about your supply chain. So understand where your goods are moving from and where they're going to, and have a way of tracking that. When you set up your e-commerce platforms or your sales databases, make sure you've got good data running through it. So there is possible with Shopify and all the other applications to put in the right VAT rates and turn them on and off and not charge VAT when you don't have to. And then probably the last thing is do talk to experts and advisors. So to make sure that you're not going to get lots of VAT registrations where you don't need to, or you're going to minimise your customs duty costs as well.
Try and simplify it the best way.
It's simplifying and it's taking a bit of advice. It won't necessarily mean you've got to do lots of actions, but you know that you don't have to do them, or you know when they might come in later.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, Rob. Thanks for speaking with me today.
Pleasure, not a problem.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and I look forward to seeing you soon.